on the news feed, and I'm like, how can you possibly say that? And again, yeah, the argument was renting and owning build wealth at roughly the same pace. Now, and in fact, I saw one other article here, I think just yesterday, where it said, yeah, Gen Z is now looking at the stock market as a way to build wealth, not housing. So there's this drumbeat about housing is a negative thing, and you don't need housing, and you can build wealth some other way. And I have argued in the past that intellectually, I don't disagree with that. You can build wealth without owning a home. But the key point has to be, is that actually bearing out to be true? And so that those who write these headlines and write these articles suggesting you don't need a home to build wealth, my word, I feel like they're just not paying attention to the data. And of course, I'm very data driven. At the end of the day, that's what I think you have to focus on. This can be kind of an emotional subject. And so that's why I wanted to go over it again. I don't want to get real preachy about it, but my word, the data just doesn't support this declaration that that renter down the street can build wealth over the next 40 years just as well as a homeowner.
Well, as you said, you've talked about this in the past, and when you mention this thing about Gen Z, Art, I just want to ask you, to me, it feels like if I were putting my money in the stock market only versus my home, I have to pay a lot closer attention to that because of the ups and downs and dips and whatnot. And people say, well, just put it in a money market account, or in a mutual fund. Well, it just feels also like it's a little more than it is a home. I don't remember. I think you've mentioned in the past over tracking, there's only been 7 times that the market has ever not gone up.
Well, exactly right. I mean, if anyone wants to go back and kind of Google the median price of a home after the last 50, 60, 70 years, what you're going to see is a graph that's going to be generally sloping upwards. There's going to be a couple of dips. Of course, what is still ingrained in everybody's mind, almost like a brand that you put on cattle, where 2008 is so stuck in everybody's memory that kind of, I think, kind of clouds thinking. But again, if you look at the history of home prices over many decades, it's a pretty impressive slope upwards, again with a couple of dips here and there. So long term, I don't know how folks can conclude that it's just too risky or too scary, because the thing about housing, and of course I'm in the mortgage business. I'm involved, I'm involved with the Greater Palm Springs Realtors Association. What we're trying to focus on here is the fact that housing is interesting because it's an opportunity to build wealth while at the same time you need shelter. So it has a utility function as well as a potential investment function in terms of growing your wealth over time. And why why more folks don't recognize that and realize that they need to take advantage of that. It's something that I'm going to continue to talk about, because my mission is to get more and more people to realize that long term, it's really a way to address a couple of basic needs that you have as a person, as a family, and to build your future.
Well, I was going to say, you talk about this data drop information. I just want to point out what you're about ready to share. It says it's coming from the 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances from the Federal Reserve. So this is not an opinion, this is data. So you want to get into that?
I do. And yeah, the reason I wanted to bring this up is that, and I think we've mentioned it before, but the Federal Reserve, I think they call it a triennial basis, every 3 years, they do this study, and they call it the Survey of Consumer Finance or Finances. And so they last did it in 2019. The most recent study was released in 2022. Now, of course, that also will tell you, therefore, they probably are in the midst of doing the report now for 2025. And of course, it takes time to get released. I would imagine it'll get released later this year, which of course, when it does, we'll have to bring that study into our program and see where the numbers are for 2025. But 2022 is a pretty recent number to look at. And so I wanted to go over some of the findings because they're pretty jaw-dropping, really, and in particular in terms of whether or not our headline there at the top of the screen really bears out. And of course, as you just pulled up here, the median net worth of a homeowner was about $396,000. That's a pretty strong number. Now, any idea you think what the renters?
I can't imagine it being anywhere near that, Art.
Well, remember we talked before that it's about a 40 times.
Oh, geez.
So of course, for our viewers, maybe go ahead and pull up the bullet point. Yeah, look at that, 10,400.
Wow.
So if that doesn't get people's attention, I don't know what will. And the reason here is the difference is the data shows that despite whoever is of the opinion that wealth creation gaps don't exist, they're wrong. They do exist. And this study every 3 years has borne that out over and over and over again.